and his speech is titled Bonding with Hobbyists. Help me introduce Frank Salazar.
Thank you, Toastmaster. I created a comic called Captain Goggles and Masked Woman. When that comic was finished, I liked how it came out. I had some characters there that I thought I would like to expand on these characters a little bit more on that story, but I wanted to be fun. And I started looking into games. And one game that kept coming up was Dungeons and Dragons, which was created many years ago, from the late 70s to early 80s. And it's a game where you just have a paper and a pencil and some dice, and that's how it started. So I thought that would be cool to do something like that with my characters. So I started some research, and it did have some stigma for a while, but I looked into it. It's basically just using your imagination and writing out your character. So I bought a starter set, and I was talking to my son, which right now my children, we are estranged. He's a very strange fellow, my son, but we are estranged. He lives in Corpus Christi. I live here in Far, Texas, and I was looking for a way to bond with my children, and I just happened to mention that I bought the starter set. And he said, Dad, can you bring that and we can play a game? Because I've been watching this TV show where they play that game. Great, perfect. I went to go visit him, his brother and sister, and we made a character sheets. He came up with his character. Unfortunately, my visit was short, so we didn't really get to play because we were making the character. When they came down here this time around, just a few weeks ago, we made more characters, and he came up with this elf character, which afterwards I looked up how to make one, and there's this website called heroforge.com where you can design your miniature. I bought the file and I had it 3D printed here at the library, and it's very cool what they can do with technology these days. This was just lines of plastic, and it formed a figure, and this is my son's elf, and he came up with this really cool name, Greg Eggnog, that's his name. And he is a magic user, so he has his staff, he has his book, and he's just there looking for an adventure. I created also another character, Leffy, and he's an elf, but he's also a cleric. He's a holy person. And as I was looking into the rules of the game for clerics, they're not allowed to have swords, which I thought was ridiculous because clerics did exist and clerics did go into battle sometimes. And there was one that I was looking up, was coming up a lot, Joan of Arc, and she went into battle carrying a big sword, and she had said, I'm not going to use this sword to kill. This is my symbol of authority. So when you see her with the sword, you know she means business. And that's why I decided to give Leffy a sword. Now, the comic I had mentioned before, Captain Goggles and Masked Woman, I made Captain Goggles, and this one I painted. Finally, I have a miniature of my character. So I told my son about these miniatures, and I told him the website where he could go and make one. So he started making more characters, and he's like, Dad, can you make these for me? I'm like, well, hold on, so they're not cheap. But we have a deal that I'll make one, and when we meet each other again, we're going to continue the story that we were playing in the game, and he liked the game. He enjoyed playing. We were playing a version of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was fun. We got my daughter involved. She made a character. I didn't make her own miniature because halfway through the game, she's like, "This is boring. I want to go outside and play with my friend." I was like, "Fine, you have friends. And so go." But I did talk to her later, and she said, "Is there other games?" And I was telling her about, "Oh, yes, there's other stuff that you can play." And I'm thinking, she likes unicorns and kittens, and like we can make a story with unicorns and kittens. So when she comes down and see me again, we can play instead of Dungeons and Dragons. We can play unicorns and kittens, and I think she'll like that even more. Playing games and looking at these miniatures, I think that's a great way to bond with people, with friends, not just my children, but with strangers. You can have a group here where you're just creating your character, you're rolling dice, and you're telling a story through interaction. And as I was looking into more research for Dungeons and Dragons and games like it, I was seeing that there's school programs where they're starting to teach that in the schools, and it's helping kids with special needs, kids with ADHD, kids who have trouble speaking out, kids who are having trouble at home that have trauma and they've closed themselves off, but once they start playing these games, they're able to interact and put that trauma away and become more social, more active. There's research, there's statistics where uh, there's a story that there was this kid that he grew up in Honduras. I think it was Honduras. I'll have to double check, but he saw his parents murdered in front of him. He came here and he was quiet, but when he started playing the game, he was able to get out of his shell and is now like an active member of society because a game took him out of that he was able to express himself more. Now, if that can do something great like that for that guy, what can it do for us that struggle with speaking in public or just anxiety, our own kids? And that's why I think bonding with games and hobbies is a good idea.